But the main thing is we're going to take a look at catastrophic plate tectonics, or mainly plate tectonics tonight. What's wrong with it? Okay, so we're going to be focusing on the Earth. This is part of their blind chance timeline. And this is what they say from blind chance. This is a college textbook. It says the origin of the geosphere is the story of the birth of our planet. The story begins in an immense cloud of gas and interstellar debris called a nebula. And it says the denser, hotter center became the sun. The dust, rocks, and gases swirled around the sun, coalescing to form planets of our solar system. No, it didn't. Because if that was true, the sun would be spinning like a top. And it's not. Jupiter's spinning like a top every 10 hours. The sun's just barely moving. It's got 2% of the spin. Plus, if that was true, the planets would be going around the sun's equator, and it's not. They're off by 7%. So that's not accurate. And it says the aggregation of nebular debris into a planet is a very violent process. Bodies ranging in size from dust to small planets collide to create larger bodies. Okay, no they don't. They collide and they blow themselves apart. And you can see this from a Nature article in 2007. It says during the initial stages of the planet formation in circumstellar gas disks, dust grains collide and build up larger and larger bodies. How this process continues from meter-sized boulders to kilometer-scale planetesimals is a major unsolved problem. So it's a problem, but that's not what they said in the textbook, is it? But it's a problem. It's a big problem. This one says in 2009, objects must have grown very rapidly from sub-meter-sized pebbles into 100-kilometer-sized bodies, possibly in a single leap. That's what they're reaching for. They got all these rescuing devices. But we'll give them that. Okay, let's have the Earth the way it is today. Okay, you're going to notice that the Earth is broken into plates. And these plates, yeah, let's see. Can you see this here? This might help. There's this mid-oceanic ridge that goes all around through here. And this is where they say that seafloor is spreading and that's pushing the continents. But the seafloor is younger than the continents. So they say that this is it's growing here, and then it's subducting there. It's going under the Earth, so it's just a recycling. Just think of a big, I don't know, elevator or escalator or something. And so this is what they imagine to be happening. But there's problems with that. Like right here, right in here, you got St. Peter and Paul Islands. They're sticking out of there. They're 2 billion years old. They should be 10 million years old. So there's problems with that, but the problems don't get addressed because the people in charge don't want them addressed. So this is plate tectonics. Well, how many plates are there? And it says there's 7 of them. And then there's minor plates. This one says 15. You know, it changes all the time, it seems. And then how many microplates are there? There's 1,200 smaller plates, microplates. So whenever they find something that doesn't go along with what they expect, they just make another plate. And it seems like that's what's happening 1,200 times. Okay, another good source of information is Walt Brown's book. You can get the ninth edition at rsr.org/HPT. So I go into that, and this is what Walt Brown says. Ocean floors constitute 70% of the Earth's solid surface. They were largely unexplored between 1957 and 1970 when the plate tectonics theory was developed. You know, it was frequently said that we knew more about Mars than about the ocean floor. So they started this theory in 1966, and they really haven't updated it since then. And so we'll take a look at what's happening. Douglas A. Block frequently told me how embarrassed he and other geology professors felt walking into class knowing students would ask questions professors could not answer. So when the plate tectonic theory was finally proposed, it was greeted with great fanfare because Earth's features might be explained by exciting new mechanisms: seafloor spreading, subduction, mountain formation, mantle circulation, hot spots, transform faults, and flipping magnetic poles, none of which has ever been seen or measured, only inferred with vivid imaginations. PT advocates assure us that these mechanisms operate too slowly to see over billions of years. See, the plates are supposed to move real slowly, maybe an inch a year. You know, that's what they're saying. But it's kind of like evolution. It happens so slowly, you can't see it. So there's a lot of imagination involved. And then one U.S. Navy scientist, N. Christian Smoot, he wrote this book right here. We'll be talking about that. And an evolutionist spent 32 years precisely mapping the ocean floor. His book, Tectonic Globaloney, Closing Arguments, in 2012, describes discoveries on the ocean floor that falsify plate tectonics. And so what was happening when this theory was being developed, he had the data from the floor, but it was top secret. And he was trying to present it, and the people who were critiquers, they didn't have the data, and so it was very frustrating for him. And he says that Smoot concludes that subduction does not occur, and the seafloor is not spreading. Those are foundational for plate tectonics. And then this is what's on the back of the book, and you can read it. I've underlaid it, some of these things. He says, the purveyors of plate tectonics are the present-day snake oil salesmen. Plate tectonics is fraught with misinformation and misconceptions. It is in need of a massive makeover. Subduction does not occur. Continental drift is a figment of overly active imaginations. Plate tectonics does not work. And this is coming from the guy who's got he had the top secret, he understands it. And he's saying it does not work. Okay, and you can get this book on Amazon. And this is what it says. This is one of the statements that popped out at me. Plate tectonics has been promoted to be one of the 5 greatest scientific paradigms ever brought forward, being listed on the equal footing with the periodic tables in chemistry. Now that's a good thing. The Big Bang theory in astronomy, evolution in biology, and Einstein's theory of relativity in physics. So the Big Bang, plate tectonics, and evolution are not really observable. It's happening so slow you can't see it. It's so far back in time, so it's a lot of imagination for those 3. And I think those 3 will fall apart in our lifetime. I am so excited, and I'm working so hard to get that Big Bang, or the hydroplate, into the mainstream, because then the Big Bang's done. And once the Big Bang's done, evolution's not far behind. And you can get a summary of this book by going into hydroplate.org, go into Hydroplate Resources, and click on Downloads, and you're going to see a summary of the book, Tectonic Globaloney, and it's written by Ellen McHenry. She does a really good job summarizing it, and here's some of the highlights. Plate tectonics is the ultimate repository of ad hocism. They're just making it up, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. And it was 17 years too late. He presented at Texas A&M 1983, but the groupthink had already taken over. That theory was just so ingrained in everything, they weren't going to change. So he says, I got there 17 years too late. And so now he's not wasting his time on the professors, because they don't change their mind. He's giving it to the kids. And so sometimes science progresses one funeral at a time. And then the red line there, it says, suppressing drilling data that conflicts with plate tectonic theory. He points a finger at the National Science Foundation for being the ultimate funding source for misinformation about tectonics. It was obvious that something major was wrong with the plate tectonic theory, so those trying to prove the theory correct should have been last in line for funding. The problem is that people who control the funding at the universities and the big-name researchers are the same people. That's right, they're policing themselves. No one is acting as watchdog, and those who ask questions become pariah. That's what's happening. The people in charge don't want things to change because they're in charge, so they're only going to promote and fund things that keep them in charge. And then he talks about Thomas Kuhn's book about the structure of scientific revolutions. It seems that most of the older generation must die off before a new paradigm can be accepted. And that happened with washing your hands after doing an autopsy. That happened with the scab lands. There's a lot of things that people are taught and they will not change, so you just have to wait for them to not be as influential anymore. Another good source of information is realscienceradio.org, and you can search Smoot versus plate tectonics. And you're going to get 3. The 3 top ones are Ellen McHenry going through 20 reasons to question plate tectonics. And then the bottom one is Jane Albright. She critiques the 3 flood models. Canopies first, and then CPTs second, and then hydroplates third. And if you want to see why hydroplates been kicked to the curb for 40 years, listen to the 3rd one. She'll go and she'll talk about why that is, and it's really sad what's happened in Christianity. And this website's really cool too. Deep magma can't rise but sinks. And this is just so much good information on there. It links to this place. This is the new concepts in global tectonics. This is kind of like the cosmologystatement.org, where these astronomers say what's wrong with the Big Bang. These are geologists who are saying what's wrong with plate tectonics, and there's a whole big list of them. They list them all on that website from all over the world, from a whole bunch of different agencies and countries, and they're geologists. geologists rejecting plate tectonics. So again, we need to get all the information to make informed decisions, and we're not getting it. And then he links to this one, Dr. Hamilton. So I found the original source is Testimony of an Insider, and it's at newgeology.us. And Dr. Warren Hamilton got a PhD in geology and was Distinguished Senior Scientist, Department of Geophysics at the Colorado School of Mines, which is pretty prestigious. For 43 years, he worked at the U.S. Geological Survey. He was an author of over 100 refereed articles, and he also received the Penrose Medal. That's the highest award a geologist can get. So he's at the top of his field, the very tip top. And this is what he says. Mantle plumes is wrong. Plumes are the lava that's going up, you know, to move the plates. He says that's wrong. But who is he to talk? Well, he's got exceptionally long experience. Yeah, 43 years, I think he would have enough. And he's an insider. And this is what he says. And I think this is happening in almost every area of science. He says, suppression of dissent is common. I know of many recent examples wherein prominent members of the dominant pro-plume community have stifled anti-plume reports and research. Bad science is to them anything contrary to their own conjectures. Reviewers who block papers by and grants to those who hold contrary views. And widely accepted assumptions regarding the composition, evolution, and behavior of the mantle appear to be in error, yet evaluation of alternatives is actively discouraged. The present enthusiasm for fixed plumes represents groupthink that is easily falsified and yet is impervious to evidence. Believers attribute miracles to plumes. Unquestioning acceptance of these speculations in geodynamics, tectonics, and petrology leads to much further work of dubious value. Our being scientists confers no infallibility upon us, and our egos often lead us astray. And that's happening even as we sit here. There are several, I can have a few of them that I've personal experience with right now, where the egos are getting in the way of science. And that has to stop. We need to progress. And I'm doing what I can to get this, the science, the censorship to stop. Okay, basic assumptions often are so entrenched that practitioners are unaware that there might be little or no evidence behind them. Grant-giving agencies require this method. Peer reviewers of proposals and manuscripts commonly enforce it. Incompatible data is made by increasing complexity of assumptions rather than seeking alternatives. Remember those epicycles that they had to put in the geocentric solar system? It was just complex. Well, that's what the blind chance theory, it's all full of these epicycles. You know, you've got the multiverse and the Oort cloud and the dynamo and dark matter, and it just goes on and on. And just believe that God made it less than 10,000 years ago, and it all fits. Okay, plate tectonics is deduced by false premises. And he even goes on more and says modelers of convection, that's convection currents. Those are the things in the earth. It's like boiling water. Cool goes to hot, cool goes to hot. That's a convection current. And that's supposed to move these plates. Okay, he says modelers of convection are unaware of elementary plate tectonics and do not realize they provide no explanation for plate movements. We would rather be right than wrong, yet science advances primarily when many of us are proven wrong. Breakthroughs, by definition, surprise most people. And it's so exciting. We are so blessed to be alive right now. We are going to see the hydroplate destroy the Big Bang. I firmly believe that with all my heart. We have more access to the information than ever before. There's more evidence against evolution in the Big Bang than ever before. But what we don't have quite yet is enough people getting informed and informing others. There's going to be a turning point. And the emperor, they're going to realize the emperor has no clothes, and everybody's going to stop believing him. And that's going to be a hallelujah breakdown moment when those things come out of our textbooks. But there's a battle, and so we fight it. And then on that same website, they've got this video, Real Science Radio, or RSR's Global Flood and the Hydroplate Theory. And that you used to have to buy there, and they're making it available for free. But before we jump into that one, I want to jump into this one. We had our first Hydroplate Theory conference in 2023, and there's a YouTube channel that has all the talks that were given. And the problem with plate tectonics is the one that I'm going to focus on tonight. This was given by Fred Williams. He's the host of Real Science Radio, and he's a software engineer. He's a really sharp guy. And he went through this 20 Reasons to Question Plate Tectonics book. And I think on the back of it, it says, for the working hypotheses to function, it must explain every geological phenomenon in every instance. Otherwise, we are left in a netherworld of ad hoc explanations for every aberration. And plate tectonics is the ultimate repository for ad hocism. That was the rest of that thing. So they're just making things up as they go. So again, there's the plates, and they're supposed to slide around real slowly. Okay, this is the main thing for plate tectonics. It depends on seafloor spreading. That's where the mid-oceanic ridge, there's stuff coming out, and it's going to the side. But it's got to go somewhere, so they call it subduction. It goes underneath another plate. Subduction, those are key. And then the rising magma, these are the convection currents, or the plumes. That's the lava that's hot, and it goes to the top, and then it goes down, goes to the top. It's cycling around these convection currents. So that's the mechanism for it. That's what plate tectonics is. That's how it works. The continents, the plates grow in the middle of the oceans, and then they get sucked in at the edges of the ocean. Is there any evidence for that? And Wikipedia says plate tectonics is the scientific theory that the Earth's lithosphere comprises a number of large tectonic plates which have been slowly moving around since about 3.4 billion years ago. So this is an old Earth model, okay? But this is what the scientists say, so what does this guy do? This is Dr. Baumgartner, and this is from Bob Enyart's video, the RSR's Global Flood and Hydroplate Theory, towards the end of that. He said that, I had an epiphany. We must figure out how to fit plate tectonics into the Bible. So they're taking a secular model, and they're trying to shoehorn it into the Bible. That's what he does. That's what his goal was. It's kind of like theistic evolutionists. They're taking a secular model and they're slapping a cross on it and trying to fit it into the Bible. And he said that, and Bob Enyart heard him say that on August 7th, 2013 at the 7th ICC. That's the International Creation Conference. And so that's what the goal of CPT is. Let's fit a secular model into the Bible. Okay, and Tom Davies, he said, indeed, we have yet to find rocks older than 200 million years in the deep oceans. That's very misleading. These observations lead to a rapid acceptance of the plate tectonics hypotheses. So they only found in the deep oceans. But right in the middle of the mid-oceanic ridge, you know, I talked about it there, they're 2 billion years old. It's sticking out of the ocean. So it doesn't make sense. And here Fred covers a brief history. By the late 1970s, groupthink had taken over, and the editorial boards of most professional journals were pressured by their financial sponsors not to publish papers that argued against plate tectonics. Grant money was denied to anyone suspect of not being on board with the CPT, the PT program. That's happening, folks. That's happening everywhere you look. They control the purse strings, and they don't want to lose the power, so they aren't going to fund a theory that's going to dethrone them. Okay, so I just did a few of the highlights from this book. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, this is 20 Reasons to Question Plate Tectonics. We just, the ones that were simpler to understand. Number one, there are too many miles of divergent boundaries. That's where the stuff's coming out of the ocean, or that's where it's forming, okay? There's too many miles of it, 148 kilometers. So there should be 148,000 kilometers of it being subducted, disappearing, but it's not. And they only got about 39,000, I think, but then they threw in mountains and stuff, so they can't explain about 100,000 kilometers of, it just doesn't work. Reason number two, there's no adequate explanation of how subduction starts. Yeah, how do you get that big plate going underneath the other ones? And this is from Walt Brown's book. He writes, if one tries to depress a plate 30 miles or more below another plate, the growing upward pressure from below would quickly stop that depression long before 30 miles of depth was reached. So subduction, necessary for plate tectonics, could not begin. And he's got the math for it, and what you notice on the bottom is there's about 5 times more stuff stopping it than pushing it. And then he's got a table too. Subduction, possible or impossible? The subducting plate would experience too much resistance in diving down through just the top of the mantle. The blunt front end alone would stop movement. Also, the unspecified force needed to overcome these resistance would, if a pushing force, crush the plate, or if a pulling force, pull the plate apart. No known forces are available to break the crust into plates and separate these plates from their bases. One plate cannot even begin its dive under the adjacent plate that is 30 to 60 miles thick. Yeah, because a cliff can only be 5 miles high on Earth. Otherwise, it crushes it. So you can't get a cliff that high. Subduction cannot occur along an arc, and we'll talk about that. Subduction is generally possible only along a straight line. But if you notice here, where are these straight lines right here? A lot of these things where they're supposed to be subducting they're curved. They're arcs and cusps. All right, beneath trenches, earthquakes sometimes occur across much broader region than the width of the plate. Yeah, it's supposed to be the earthquakes are on the plate lines, but India's right in the middle of a plate, and they got earthquakes a lot. Okay, thick buoyant continents would prevent subduction. In at least 3 locations on Earth, a trench, which is going down, intersects a ridge, which is going up. And so material cannot be going down and up at the same time. So that's Walt Brown's 2 cents on it. And then they do these seismic waves. When there's an earthquake, they measure how fast it goes through stuff. And if it's more dense, it goes through faster, like granite. Or if it's less dense, like sand, it'll be a lot slower. And so that's how they do it. Otherwise, if it's colder, it can go through faster also. So they've got this blue line here, which is denser or colder, but we don't know. It's where P waves sometimes travel 6% faster than normal. Those regions, such as shown in blue above, are either colder or denser than normal. Which is it? The plate tectonics people, they say that's colder. We would predict that's where the slab's going underneath. That's colder. But we don't know that. It could also be denser. Deep earthquakes do not define a descending slab. In fact, do not even occur in most places along the trenches. Therefore, subduction does not occur. Plate tectonics does not work. And again, this is from N. Christian Smoot, the guy with all the top secret information when this thing was getting put together. That must have been so hard for him to watch. Reason number 4. The Pacific Ocean doesn't have enough distinct spreading centers, even though it covers a large section of the globe. So that squiggly line there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean to the bottom right, that's the only place where they got stuff growing. There's only one option. The East Pacific Rise must be the primary spreading center for the Pacific, even though it was far from the center. The theorists trusted that as time went on, more spreading sites would be found. But that didn't happen. They predicted they'd find the Darwin Rise right over there, but it's not there. So they've got failed predictions. And so Fred, he types into, I think it was ChatGPT or whatever, some AI. He said, is the East Pacific Rise the only divergent zone in the Pacific? I mean, is that the only place where this stuff is being formed on the plates? And AI says, no, the East Pacific Rise is not the only divergent divergent zone in the Pacific Ocean. And it goes on to say the Mid-Pacific Ridge, and he mentions that, and Fred says, I never heard of that. He Googles around and he comes and he asks another question. Does the Mid-Pacific Ridge really exist? And AI says, I apologize. There is no widely recognized geological feature known as the Mid-Pacific Ridge. But he just told them that was where it was. So be real careful about taking your facts from AI. And this has happened several times that I've heard about where they'll give you the wrong answer and then they'll apologize if you correct them. So be very, very leery about AI. Okay, number 5, if subduction has happened, that's where one plate's going underneath another one. If this has happened, we should find a huge volume of sediments that have been scraped off as the plate subducted. Instead, we find shallow, relatively undisturbed sediments. So this isn't going real well for them. And then they say, well, maybe those volcanoes, those seamounts in the Pacific, maybe they grab it and they bring in that sediment below the crust. But is it reasonable to think that a cone-shaped object would be able to act like a bulldozer? Wouldn't the sediments slide right around the cones? Wouldn't the lumpy seamounts act like brakes and slow down the subducting plate? Would a pile of sediments really be able to lift a 5 to 10 kilometer thick continental plate made of granite? Those are some good questions. And I think those are questions that CPT people should answer. And we're trying to get them asked, but we'll see if they step up to the microphone. And basically it says the thickness of the sediments piled up should be 10 kilometers high. That's what, 6.5 miles. And we don't see that. Okay, number 9, reason to question is the arc and cusp pattern around the ring of fire and along the trench zones creates an impossible geometry for plate subduction. So if you're pulling a sheet over a table, that's what it would look like. It'll work if it's straight. but it's kind of weird if it's curved, and that's what we see. We see all these curved things but we don't see you know how you saw the lines where it's buckling above and below? Yeah, we see the cusps, but we don't see the lines. Okay, the cusps, that's where it's supposed to be going in, but they're not straight. So that's a hard one for the plate tectonics people. And if you want to dive down deep on this one, this is on the 9th edition, this is page 365. It's got, I love his decision trees in the book. He's got the theories, the competing theories on top, and then he's got the features down on the side. And as you can see, the hydroplate is green almost all the way down, a couple of yellows. And the plate tectonics is red all the way down, except for a couple of yellows. And I think we got to start talking about the hydroplate. This has to come into the mainstream. And the pastor Sunday night, he asked me, where's a good website for that? And so I was able to plug him in, and we just keep planting these seeds. Reads in 11, the uneven topography of the lithosphere and asthenosphere interface makes it impossible for continental plates to move. So these plates are not like toboggans being drug across the floor. You know, these are more like they got spikes going in. It's kind of like if you had two egg cartons, one on top of the other, try to slide one away from the other one. It's not going to happen. Today, geologists and geophysicists tend to treat pieces of Earth's crust like a room full of furniture. Objects can be pushed around at will until whatever configuration is required to satisfy a particular model. Unfortunately, the Earth's crust is not so easily manipulated if one is faithful to physical laws. He states that the lithosphere is like a massive 100-kilometer deep interlocking mosaic of uneven rock, which makes plate motion extremely unlikely. Yeah, and I just want you to think about this. I mean, these aren't lily pads floating around here. There's underneath the water, if there's a big bathtub, you drain it all, there's still a lot of dirt. You know, these are not lily pads. They don't get pushed around like as easy as they say. All right. Okay, and you can even check it out from nature. This is from 2021, rather recent. Deep continental roots and cratons. Just think of cratons as roots of the mountains. They go deep. The mountain roots go deep. The formation and preservation of cratons, the oldest parts of the continent, comprising over 60% of the continental land mass, remains an enduring problem. They can't explain it. Why? Because the roots are 150 to 250 kilometers thick. That's 90 to 150 miles for us. Deep. You're going to move one of them? No, that's set in there. That's not moving. Reason 12. The rocks on the mid-Atlantic ridge should be the younger rocks in the Atlantic, yet there's much data that challenges this claim, and we mentioned this earlier. This is the St. Peter and Paul rocks between Africa and South America. That's where the mid-oceanic ridge sticks out of the water, just like at Iceland. It sticks out of the water. The rocks here, according to plate tectonics theory, should be less than 10 million radiometric years. However, rocks giving radiometric ages of up to 2 billion years have been found. Okay, so that's a problem. And also in Iceland, this crack should have been like 20 meters away. It hasn't moved in 1,000 years. Okay, number 13, Bullard's Fit. That's where they move the continents together and they say this is how it was. What they don't tell you is that Central America is missing and Africa was shrunk by 40%. And the continents had to be rotated, some clockwise and others counterclockwise. How did seafloor spreading manage to not only move the continents apart, but rotate them also? See, a much better explanation for why they look like puzzle pieces is if you just slide them just get them close to that mid-oceanic ridge, that's the yellow line, and then allow a few hundred miles for the erosion and for the continents to slide, and then it fits. You don't have to shrink Africa, you don't have to rotate anything, it just fits. And what you'll notice there is that the major mountain ranges are parallel to the mid-Atlantic ridge. And notice how the Rockies are twice as big as the Andes. And I think that's because the Rockies slid over the mid-oceanic ridge. And so there's a lot of things that make sense. Reason 14, fracture zones along the ridges are said to show the direction of seafloor spreading in the past. As we map more of the ocean floor, we find many fracture zones and fault lines that challenge this hypothesis. And this is what from N. Christian Smoot, he's the expert, it's top secret stuff. He says, fracture zones distorted in National Geographic maps in a way that support plate tectonics, rather than showing the direction of seafloor spreading, leave nothing more than a pattern of at least 4 different directions on the ocean floor as they intersect at random fashion. Okay, so you can't trust National Geographic, I guess. Okay, number 17. Magma is compressible fluid and sinks when below 200 kilometers. This means that mantle convection and mantle plumes are impossible. Remember, that's how the plates are supposed to move. You got the mantle or the lava that's getting hot and going down like boiling water. But it's not possible because at a certain depth, it's going to get so dense, it's going to sink, and it can't come up. They call that the crossover depth, or the crossover density. You know, that ball there, it's above it, so it's going to go up. You know, if it's above that, it's going to go up, but if it's below that, it's going to go down. It's not going to do that. And so that in the circle there, 2,800 kilometers, that's going down. It's not coming up in that circle there. So it's not possible. Okay, and then this is the borehole, the German KTB borehole. Taught geologists the same lesson that Kola borehole did. That's the one's in Germany, one's in Russia. They drilled down there, got about 7 miles or so, and they found crushed granite with salt water. They didn't expect to find that. But seismic studies have given us very little information about what is deep underground. Plate tectonics theory has not proven useful in predicting what we'll find when we dig deep into the ground. And they can't go any deeper because there's so much pressure. Remember, you can only have a cliff 5 miles high because then otherwise the granite it can't handle it, turns into putty. And that's what happens here. It costs like, I forget, $800,000 a day to dig down there. And then when they pull the bit up, and they go back down again, it fills up. It's like putty at that depth. And there shouldn't be any water below that, but there is because of the hydroplates right. The traditional idea that geological data obtained from the surface can be directly correlated with geological matters in the deep crust must be re-examined. The Kola borehole revealed how far from truth scientific theories can roam. So there's a lot of things that are not adding up. Reason number 20. Even though magnetic anomalies helped plate tectonics theory to gain acceptance, there are many problems surrounding them. Yeah, there are. No, it's cherry picking. The southwest of Iceland, that's what they use. It's like, no, look at all these straight lines, all these magnetic reversals, or however they want to interpret that. Why didn't they go to the northeast or go to the east? You know, they're just cherry picking that data, and it doesn't fit all around the world. Fred Williams goes in a little bit deeper on that, but it doesn't work. And then he wrote, did magnetic reversals correspond to rock age increase from the mid-oceanic ridge? Yes, magnetic, that's what the scientists kept telling me. See, the rock closest to the ridge is younger than the rock farther away from the ridge. That's what he kept telling me. I'm going to ask for studies if they ever say that again. Yes, magnetic reversals do correspond to an increase in the age of rocks as you move away from the mid-oceanic ridges. The correlation is one of the key pieces of evidence supporting the theory of seafloor spreading and plate tectonics. What they're not telling you is they've only reached the mantle, the farther away from the ridge like 8 times. You know, they get the sediment, but they can't get down to the basement. It's hard to get down there. And so then they just assume that that's what's happening. But then on number 4, it says correlation with age. Geologists can determine the ages of these magnetic stripes by dating the rocks and sediments in the ocean floor. Okay, so they're using the rocks to date the magnetic stripes and the magnetic stripes to date the rocks. And Fred says, isn't that circular reasoning? And AI said, well, they did some word salad that said it wasn't. Okay, now we're going to jump back into the book, and we're going to take a look at the miracles. This is what Walt Brown says, miracles for catastrophic plate tectonics, people. These are the miracles that have to happen for catastrophic plate tectonics, CPT, to be true. And you don't need these miracles with the hydroplate. It's easily explained with the hydroplate. But he goes on to say that intervention, this is what the CPT guys say, intervention by God in the natural order during and after the the flood, basically, the catastrophe, appears to be a logical necessity. Enhanced rate of nuclear decay during the event, that's miracle number 1, and a loss of thermal energy afterward, miracle number 2. And he says, if so much rock, 10 million cubic miles, suddenly became 720 degrees Fahrenheit colder, the rock's density would increase so much it might fracture the Earth's crust globally. Okay, so much that it might. Do you see that? It might. That's a fuzzy word. Okay, this isn't science. It might fraction the Earth. Earth's crust globally forming plates. That's miracle number 3. And that's the other question. How'd the plates break up? And then it goes on and it says, then the edges of some plates might be so dense that they would sink into the mantle. Miracle 4. And then subduction might begin. But just to be sure, Baumgartner assumes the mantle was much less viscous than today. Miracle number 5. And then number 6, temperatures cannot drop below absolute zero, which is negative 460 Fahrenheit. So it's impossible for anything colder than a blazing hot 260 degrees Fahrenheit, that's boiling, okay, to drop to 720 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the heat is so great that it would take millions of years for just half of that heat to radiate from the Earth. Therefore, he needs required miracle number 7. God must remove that heat quickly. So there's a lot of miracles that CPT is depending on. Miracle 8, to produce the blanket of sediment that is spread over the continents, an average of depth of 1.2 miles. He imagines there was a moon-sized body orbiting so close to the Earth that tides, 1.6 miles high, were produced in a few days. Those tides eroded the needed sediments. This dramatic miracle is repeated 6 times. And then it left. Now that's what he said in 2013. He's since backed away from it, but he had to go to that extreme to get all the sediment onto the continents. Now I think he's just talking about tsunamis. 6 tidal waves came across the Earth to get the layers. Okay, and then super tides lasted 150 days. Turbulent, cavitating, high-velocity water averages 45 miles per hour. Why weren't all plants, animals, and the ark pulverized? Where's the moon-sized body today? No answers were given. Miracles 9 and 10 might be needed. But what's really sad at that ICC is some of the CPT guys, 2 of them, and I blocked them out, that said that the radioactivity indicates the moon was created before day 4, which is contrary to what the Bible says. And thank God for Danny Faulkner. Bob Enyart says Danny Faulkner got up and said, you know, I think I need to rebuke you. This is not what we're about. We're about supporting the Bible, and you're not going to contradict it. So, and then in that Jane Albright article, they mentioned this, and they were unaware if they've ever retracted that statement. So ask a CPT, when was the CPT person, when was the moon created? See what they say. Okay, and the writer of latest standardized letter, okay, now this has changed, I think. I think that they aren't as adamant, and they aren't so biased against the hydroplate. The writer, standardized letter criticizing the hydroplate theory later admitted that he had not read the theory. And that's happening a lot. They're very dogmatic about a theory they don't understand. And if you want to see how well, or how their lack of understanding, that's that jousting flood models we did 2 months ago. And yeah, they just don't understand it. But ICR is getting a lot better. And apparently Dr. Galuza mentioned the hydroplate on Saturday, which I would have been so excited, and he was positive about it. Praise the Lord for that. We're making inroads. Now we're trying to get a couple of organizations we're talking to. And one of them I talked to at the conference. And he doesn't like this censorship either. He says, let's have a private conversation between the CPT and the HPT experts. Let's do that. And so we're working on it. We're working on it. And there's, yeah, it's a whole nother talk. Okay. And this is from a pastor. This is what a pastor wrote. He said, I wanted to give blank, and if I said his name, you would know who it was, at least to read Walt's book. I gave him a copy of In the Beginning. Oops. He was hostile and arrogant toward Walt and personally out toward the hydroplate theory. He had never read Walt's theory. And later on, he was a guest at a pastor's conference, and I asked him if he'd read it, and he said he had not. What was shocking to me was that he still refused to read Walt's book. A theory that's making accurate predictions, they won't take the time to listen to it, and that's really sad. And then there was this another creationist from an organization, agreed to make a technical response if I would send him a free copy of the book. I sent the book. And 6 weeks later, he told me that he still had not read the book, did not intend to, and would not make any kind of technical response since he knew the catastrophic plate tectonic theory was correct, and therefore the hydroplate theory had to be wrong. So that's begging the question. That's assuming the conclusion is assumed in the beginning. You're just assuming it to be true, but that's what's happening. And that bothers me. So I'm doing as much as I can to kick these doors open and See who runs from the microphone. That's what we're doing right now. Who wants to defend the CPT? Who's willing to step up to the microphone? And a lot of people are running from it, which should tell the presidents of these organizations a lot of things. Okay, I suggest, and this is from another one, from a financial guy, I suggest that someone at the Technical Journal would read and study Brown's work before allowing this blatant misrepresentation to happen again. Shame on the editors for letting this type of poor work get out. So that's what's happening. People are starting to push back, and we need more people to start pushing back when they start criticizing the theory without understanding the theory. You know, I was in Uppsala, and I heard a creationist speak, and I asked him about the hydroplate, and he said it doesn't work, and I said, why not? And he said, because it breaks laws of physics. And I asked, what laws of physics? And he said, I don't know. But the geologists that I know don't go along with the hydroplate. So that's what it's these people that have not understood the hydroplate. All the other creationists are depending on their expertise to see if the hydroplate is good. And so we're really working hard to get that cleaned up. So let's summarize real quick. This is from the summary of Christian Smoot's book. He says, major problems with the plate tectonics theory, the geometry that won't work. You know, that's because there's too many miles of stuff that's supposed to be making the plates and not enough of it getting subducted. And misinterpreted magnetic data, rocks on the mid-oceanic ridge that give radiometric dates of over a billion years, and there's no subduction. And here's some unresolved problems. What's the driving mechanism? How do you get these plates to move? And these things don't move around like a piece of furniture. So to summarize real quickly, yeah, we gave you what the experts were saying. The Navy guy and also the Primrose guy. These are at the top of the field, and these are some of their quotes. Their quotes. Snake oil salesman. Okay, PT proponents are the modern day snake oil salesman. And it's too slow to see. Plate tectonics doesn't work. There's groupthink. They only fund plate tectonics. They only publish plate tectonics. They suppress data, suppress dissent, and add epicycles. They keep imagining things to be true. And it's based on false premises. And I believe that it's unfortunate. I hope it doesn't happen this way, but one funeral at a time, science is going to progress. And then these are the facts that they can't really answer. Okay, there's 90 to 150 mile cratons. Those are the mountain roots. Those aren't sliding around. It's based on 8 miracles, maybe 9 or 10 miracles. And then the moon before day 4, that's odd. Okay, but we don't see subduction, we don't see the seafloor spreading, we don't see mantle plumes, and there's a crossover density where the plumes are going to sink, they aren't going to go up, the lava isn't. And there's too many miles of places where that's supposed to be forming and not enough of it getting sucked in. And there's no mid-Pacific ridge. Remember, they wanted the Darwin Ridge, they couldn't find it. And there's failed predictions. There's no sediment from the subduction. You know, there should be all this stuff scraped off. And then the arc and cusp trenches, it doesn't work. It can't subduct into them. And then you got the 2 billion year old rock on the mid-oceanic ridge. And once again, continents are not lily pads. You can't just push them around like that. So what do we have here? We need you. We really do. We got more information against the Big Bang and evolution than we've ever had before. We've got more easy access to this information than we've ever had before. So we've got the bullets, if you will, to take down these 2 pillars of atheism. We just don't have enough soldiers yet. So what we need are people to get informed and start informing others. And there's a reason for that. This is what somebody if you want to know about the hydroplate, this is one of the talks that I gave at St. Cloud State, Answers to Scientific Problems. This guy said, I've been studying hydroplate theory for roughly 2 years now, and sometimes I even rewatch the same videos, particularly Brian Nichols' videos. Yeah, his are excellent. Really good. Really well done. And it never gets old. It contains so much information that I learn something new each time I watch a video about it. This one theory has answered so many questions I had, and even many questions I didn't realize I had. Praise Jesus. There are a few things in life that have ever excited me as the topic of hydroplate theory. Thank you so much for what you're doing, kind sir. So if you want some excitement in your life, start studying the hydroplate. It is the best theory out there, and it even answers questions that scientists can't answer. This one theory, when people get a grasp of it, when this gets in the mainstream and people really understand it, they're going to be looking at NASA and it's like, what are you wasting your money on that stuff for? It just makes no sense. Okay, and so with that, thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate that.